a human warrior attended an alien wedding, and became the king's son-in-law. Rylan had never expected an invitation like this. Sitting in the dim light of his quarters aboard the Star Strider, he turned the elegant, holographic envelope over in his hands. The script shimmered in gold and silver, unfamiliar in every way, yet unmistakably formal. He read it carefully. He, a human warrior, had been invited to attend the wedding of Princess Lyra of the Zithurian Empire. He blinked. His mind immediately raced through the possibilities. Humans were not common guests in the courts of alien empires. They were considered unpredictable, sometimes reckless, sometimes dangerous. And yet, here was a personal invitation addressed directly to him. "Why me?" he muttered aloud, his voice rough from years of battle and long travels. He leaned back, letting his fingers trace the edge of the glowing invitation. The Zithurian Empire was known throughout this sector for its wealth, its strict rules, and its power. It was a place of floating cities, cities that hovered above oceans of bioluminescent waters, lit by the soft glow of alien moons. A wedding there would be unlike anything he had ever seen, but Rylan did not hesitate for long. Curiosity was a dangerous thing for someone like him, but it was also irresistible. He gathered his gear, his trusted plasma blade, a few personal shields, and his travel robes, which were designed to adjust to gravity and atmospheric differences. He stepped onto the observation deck, staring at the stars as the Star Strider jumped into faster-than-light travel. The journey was long, giving Rylan time to consider the situation. He thought about the possibilities. Was this an honor, a trap, or perhaps a test? Whatever it was, he could only handle it as he always had, with eyes open and instincts ready. When the ship finally slowed, he caught his first glimpse of Zithuria. The planet glimmered beneath him, oceans of deep violet stretching across vast continents, dotted with floating spires that reflected sunlight in a dazzling display. Even from orbit, the power of the Empire was obvious. The palace, enormous and suspended above a swirling lavender sea, seemed to float without any visible support. As he descended toward the landing platform, Rylan felt the weight of alien eyes upon him. Courtiers and guards in luminous armor lined the skyways, their forms tall and angular, with skin that shifted color depending on mood. Their eyes, large and bright, followed him as he landed. A few nodded respectfully, most simply watched, calculating his every move. "Welcome, human warrior," a voice said, melodic but firm. A Zithurian official approached, hands clasped together. "You honor our court by attending the wedding. I am Velrin, Master of Protocol. Follow me." Rylan nodded, gripping his robes. His instincts screamed caution. He had been in courts before, different species, different worlds, but none like this. Every step he took would be watched, analyzed. Mistakes could be dangerous. The corridors of the palace were like nothing Rylan had ever seen. They curved and twisted impossibly, walls shifting color as if alive. Floors seemed to ripple beneath his feet, yet held firm. He saw beings from countless species moving about, all dressed in garments that shimmered and changed with the light. It was a gathering of the galaxy's most powerful and perhaps most dangerous. Finally, they arrived at the central hall. It was enormous, stretching farther than his eyes could see. Crystal columns rose to a ceiling that was itself alive, glowing with floating lights and symbols. The air hummed softly, charged with energy, and at the far end, standing beside a throne carved from the living crystal of Zithuria itself, was the princess. Lyra. She was unlike any noble Rylan had imagined. Tall and graceful, with eyes that seemed to shine with intelligence and humor, she studied him with curiosity. Her robes flowed around her, catching the light in a display of colors that shifted as she moved. She did not seem distant, as most royals did. She seemed aware. Acknowledging him as more than just a guest. Velrin spoke quickly in the alien tongue, and Rylan relied on the universal translator embedded in his comm device. "The ceremony will begin shortly. You will be expected to participate in the rituals. Please follow the instructions carefully." Rylan nodded again. He had no idea what that meant, but he could adapt. He had done it before, on alien worlds, in courts, in battlefields where he knew nothing of the rules. As he waited, he observed the guests. Some were whispering, their many-limbed forms gesturing at him. A few looked openly hostile, as if daring him to make a mistake. Others seemed intrigued, leaning closer to see what a human might do in such a place. Rylan's jaw tightened. He did not seek to impress anyone, but he did know one thing: humans were resourceful. If the court wanted to judge him, they would see the truth soon enough. The first ritual began. It was strange and intricate. Beams of light formed patterns around the guests, symbols of unity and protection, while participants moved in precise formations, their motions synchronized to musical tones that resonated in the chest and bones. Rylan followed the motions as best he could, noting the timing and responding with gestures that were roughly correct. He could feel the eyes on him, measuring every move. Then came a test. Two Zithurian nobles stepped forward, presenting a ceremonial crystal that hummed with energy. He was to touch it, a simple act, but if done incorrectly, it could trigger a defensive system meant to punish dishonesty or error. Rylan steadied his breathing. His hand closed around the crystal. A soft pulse of energy ran through him. He held still, mimicking the noble's posture. The pulse subsided. He had passed. A few guests whispered, impressed. Others frowned, recalculating his potential. Rylan ignored them. He had passed one test, but he knew there would be more. Hours passed. The rituals continued, each more elaborate than the last. At times, Rylan felt like he was learning an alien dance of diplomacy, where missteps could cause offense or worse. But he adapted. Observation and instinct were his allies, and slowly the whispers around him changed. Curiosity grew into cautious admiration. During a break, Lyra approached him. Her voice was soft, though it carried authority. "You are unlike the other guests," she said. "They come with ambition or fear. You just seem to observe. Why?" Rylan looked at her, meeting her eyes. He could feel the weight of the court around them, yet here she was, speaking directly, without ceremony. "I survive by seeing the truth," he said simply. "And the truth is, sometimes it is hidden beneath customs and words. I respect what is real." She smiled, faintly intrigued. "Honesty is rare in this court. Perhaps that is why the elders invited you, or perhaps because they suspect you cannot be controlled." Rylan shrugged. "I am no one's pawn. I have always made my own path. I imagine that is not surprising to anyone who has watched humans before." Lyra tilted her head, studying him. "No, it is surprising. To see a human here behaving without arrogance or fear, it is unusual." Before Rylan could respond, a sudden disturbance rippled through the hall. A low hum grew into a warning tone, and several nobles turned sharply, their limbs extended in defensive gestures. Something was wrong. Rylan's instincts kicked in immediately. He scanned the crowd, searching for anomalies. His eyes caught a figure attempting to move against the flow of the ceremony, hands reaching toward the energy conduits that powered the hall's protective wards. Without hesitation, Rylan stepped forward. He moved with precision, intercepting the figure before they could cause harm. The guest froze, caught by the human's speed and awareness. The crowd gasped, a mix of fear and astonishment. Lyra's eyes widened, then softened in approval. "You act quickly," she said under her breath. "I like that." Velryn arrived moments later, bowing deeply. "Master Warrior, your vigilance has prevented a disaster. The ceremony can continue safely thanks to you." Rylan nodded, feeling the weight of eyes on him. He had done what he always did, act before thinking too much, rely on his instincts, and adapt to circumstances. It had worked again. As the ceremony resumed, Rylan noticed something remarkable. The guests, who had been skeptical or hostile, now watched him differently. Whispers spread through the hall, carried by translators and subtle gestures. A human warrior had demonstrated skill and calm under pressure. The Empire had seen a glimpse of something they did not often witness: courage without politics, strength without arrogance. By the end of the first day, the wedding festivities had become a test of more than ritual. Rylan realized that his presence here was not accidental. He had been chosen, not merely as a guest, but as someone whose actions could shift perceptions. And somewhere deep down, he felt that this was only the beginning. As night fell over Zithuria, the palace glowing softly under twin moons, Rylan stood on a balcony overlooking the floating city. The lights shimmered across the violet seas below. He thought about the days ahead, the ceremonies, the political intrigues, and the potential dangers he had yet to encounter. One thing was certain. In this alien empire, a human could either be an outsider or something far more significant. And Rylan intended to prove that humanity was capable of far more than they expected. He looked at the palace ahead, the halls where every step would be watched, every action measured. He clenched his fist lightly. Whatever awaited him here, he would face it head-on. For Rylan, a human warrior, this was more than an invitation. It was a challenge, and he had never turned away from one. And so, as the moons of Zithuria bathed the city in silver light, Rylan prepared himself. The wedding was only the beginning. The human warrior had arrived, and the Empire would soon learn that courage could come in any form, even one that walked on two legs, carried no title, and answered to no one but himself. The next morning, Rylan awoke to the soft hum of the palace around him. Light filtered through walls that shimmered and shifted in color, reflecting the alien architecture that was as beautiful as it was strange. He stretched, feeling the familiar tension in his muscles from the journey and yesterday's events. Every part of his body remembered the long hours of travel, the rituals, and the way every eye in the hall had followed him. He dressed in the ceremonial robes provided for him. The material was alive in a way, adjusting to his form, and glowing faintly with patterns that moved as he walked. He had worn strange uniforms before, but nothing like this. It was elegant, almost uncomfortable, yet powerful in its display. He checked the straps on his plasma blade beneath the robe, just in case. Even here, appearances were secondary to preparedness. As he stepped into the corridors, Rylan immediately noticed the change in the court. Guests who had been skeptical yesterday now glanced at him with curiosity, and a few with outright respect. The story of how he had quietly intercepted the figure during the ceremony had spread. Whispers floated through the corridors, their meaning unclear to him, but the tone unmistakable. The humans were unusual, capable, and not to be ignored. Lyra appeared in the grand hall, her robes flowing in the way that seemed natural yet deliberately striking. She approached him with a soft, confident smile. "Good morning, Rylan. I trust you slept well?" "Enough," he replied with a small grin. "These rooms are impressive, but the bed is firm, better for sleep than for comfort." She laughed lightly. It was melodic, carrying a rhythm unfamiliar to him, but comforting nonetheless. "You seem ready for the day. That is good. Today will be a series of challenges, rituals, tests, and social interactions. You must be attentive." Rylan nodded. "I've learned to watch and adapt." "I imagine this will be no different." Lyra studied him for a moment. "You do not speak like the others. Most guests try to impress with words or flattery. You speak with honesty. It is refreshing." Before he could respond, Velrin arrived, motioning for him to follow. "Master Warrior, the first challenge awaits. It is not a battle of arms, but of presence and understanding. We call it the Dance of Unity." Rylan raised an eyebrow. A dance. He had fought through countless battles, survived ambushes, and faced creatures that could crush a human in moments. Yet here, he was expected to dance in zero gravity, in a ceremonial display meant to symbolize unity and cooperation among diverse species. He followed Velrin to a vast chamber where lights floated in patterns across the room. Guests from many species moved gracefully, limbs and appendages weaving through the air. They glided without touching the ground, guided by subtle fields of energy that responded to their motions. The effect was breathtaking, almost hypnotic. Rylan studied the movements carefully. He had no idea how he would manage them, but he remembered something his father had told him long ago: watch first, act second. Observation was the key to survival in any environment. When it was his turn, he stepped into the center of the chamber. The energy fields adjusted to his presence, lifting him gently off the ground. He moved cautiously at first, mimicking the gestures of those around him. He felt awkward at first. Human bodies were not built like Zithurians, but slowly, instinct and timing helped him match the rhythm. A few eyes widened. He was not perfect, but he was competent, and that was enough. By the end of the dance, he had earned a nod of approval from Velrin and a quiet smile from Lyra, who observed him from the edge of the chamber. After the dance, Rylan was led to another part of the palace for what Velrin described as social calibration. He was expected to interact with guests, some of whom were political rivals, others curious onlookers. It was not combat, but it was a battlefield of etiquette, strategy, and observation. Rylan moved among the crowd carefully. Some approached him with questions designed to confuse or embarrass him. "Human, do your species always survive unarmed among strangers?" one asked, a sly tone in their voice. "I survive because I observe, adapt, and act when needed," Rylan replied calmly. "Weapons help, but awareness is more important." The guest blinked, surprised at the lack of arrogance or fear. They whispered to another guest, clearly impressed. Rylan did not celebrate. He did not need approval. He needed survival and understanding. Hours passed, filled with formal conversations, ceremonial meals, and intricate rituals that involved delicate manipulations of energy crystals. Every task required attention to detail. A single misstep could insult a powerful noble, trigger a security alert, or reveal ignorance. Rylan adapted with care, observing the reactions of those around him, mimicking gestures and answering questions truthfully but diplomatically. At one point, a guest attempted to challenge him openly. "If humans are so clever, prove it. Solve this puzzle that even my people find difficult." Rylan accepted. The puzzle involved aligning several floating energy orbs in a sequence that resonated with a harmonic field. Each orb's movement affected the others, creating a complex system. Most would have been confused, relying on trial and error. Rylan paused, analyzing the patterns, understanding the relationships between the orbs. With deliberate movements, he aligned them in the correct sequence. A soft hum confirmed success. The crowd murmured. Whispers turned into audible praise. Lyra's eyes sparkled. "You are not only brave, Rylan, but clever as well," she said quietly. The day continued with challenges that tested his mind, reflexes, and adaptability. He found himself learning quickly alien languages, symbolic gestures, and social hierarchies. It was exhausting, but Rylan thrived on challenges. For him, every obstacle was a puzzle, and every solution strengthened his place in the court. As evening approached, Velrin led Rylan to a private balcony overlooking the palace gardens. Bioluminescent plants glowed softly, casting colors across the floating platforms and reflecting in the waters below. The air was filled with a soft, pleasant hum, as though the world itself was alive and observing them. "You have done well today," Velrin said. "Few outsiders survive the first day without making major errors. You have impressed many, and that is not an easy feat." Rylan nodded. "It is not about impressing. It is about understanding. The moment you believe you are safe in such a place is the moment danger finds you." Velrin studied him, clearly intrigued. "You think like a warrior, yes, yet you are in a court, not a battlefield. Here, cunning and observation often matter more than strength." "I understand," Rylan said simply. "I have always adapted. That is all I do." As Velrin departed, Lyra appeared at the balcony's edge, her eyes catching the soft glow of the gardens. "You have adapted well," she said, "and yet I sense you are not yet comfortable." "Why?" Rylan considered his answer. "This place is alien. Every gesture, every word is a test. I can succeed, but I must remain alert. Complacency is dangerous." She nodded, understanding more than he expected. "Yes, and yet you move through it as though it is natural. That is what makes you remarkable." Before they could speak further, a sudden alarm sounded through the palace. Lights flickered, and the hum of energy shifted into a sharp tone. Guests glanced around in confusion and concern. Rylan's instincts kicked in immediately. He scanned the corridors and halls, noticing movement that did not belong. A group of figures attempted to approach the ceremonial energy conduits, the same areas that had been threatened yesterday. This was no coincidence. He moved swiftly, intercepting one of the intruders before they could reach the conduits. The figure struggled, surprised by Rylan's speed and precision. Within moments, the palace security arrived, aided by Rylan's direction. The intruders were subdued before any damage could occur. Lyra appeared, her expression a mix of relief and admiration. "Again, you act before others can react. I see why the elders trust you." Rylan nodded, not proud but aware of the significance. "I act because someone must, otherwise mistakes become disasters." The rest of the evening continued without incident, but the message was clear. The palace, the wedding, and the empire itself had dangers hidden beneath their beauty. And humans, often underestimated, could change the course of events simply by being observant and decisive. As night deepened, Rylan walked through the glowing gardens, reflecting on the day. He had faced rituals, social challenges, and threats, yet he had emerged unscathed and respected. More importantly, he had begun to understand the rhythm of this alien court, the subtle rules that governed behavior, and the alliances that could shift with a single action. He knew that the days ahead would be even more complex. Political intrigue, rivalries among nobles, and threats to the princess were likely just beginning, but he felt ready. He was a human, after all, adaptable, determined, and unafraid of challenges that others might consider impossible. Lyra approached him once more as the moons of Zithuria cast a soft silver glow over the palace. "Rylan, you are unlike anyone I have met in this court, I think." I think you may be more than just a guest here. He turned to her, meeting her gaze steadily. I do not know what that means yet, but I will do what I can to survive and protect. That is all I ever promise. She smiled faintly, a hint of amusement and curiosity in her eyes. Good, that is enough for now. And so the human warrior continued through the alien world, respected, alert, and increasingly entwined with the fate of the princess, the palace, and perhaps the entire empire. The wedding had begun, but Rylan knew that true tests were only just starting. The empire had seen a glimpse of human skill, courage, and determination, and it would see more. Rylan clenched his fists lightly, feeling the quiet hum of energy beneath his feet. Whatever came next, he would face it. Because humans were unpredictable, clever, and unyielding, and Rylan intended to prove that here, in the heart of an alien empire, humans could thrive where others might fail. The morning air in the palace gardens carried a soft, alien fragrance, unfamiliar yet strangely comforting. To Rylan, he walked among the glowing flora, careful not to disturb the delicate balance of light and energy that made the Zithurian palace feel alive. He had begun to understand the rhythms of the court, the subtle ways that power and influence flowed through gestures, words, and alliances. But today felt different. Velryn had summoned him early. There are matters that require your attention, he said, voice calm but urgent. Not all are ceremonies or dances. Some threats hide behind smiles and polite bows. Be prepared. Rylan nodded. He had grown accustomed to danger in unfamiliar forms. The palace had already shown him that even a celebration could harbor hidden risks. His eyes scanned the corridors instinctively, noting the subtle glances of nobles and the controlled gestures of palace staff. Every motion carried meaning, and he had learned to watch for it. Lyra appeared as he prepared to enter the main hall. She moved with the elegance and poise of royalty, yet there was an ease to her steps when she was near him. Rylan, she said, her voice quiet. I know the elders value your vigilance, but remember, not all threats are physical. Some are social, some are political. You must navigate both. I understand, he replied. I've dealt with both before. Observation and quick thinking are as effective as a blade. She nodded. Good, then you will be ready. The first challenge of the day was a banquet, not an ordinary one, but a gathering of representatives from rival alien clans. Each guest had their own agenda, their own ambitions, and their own reasons for attending. Rylan had learned that a mistake here, an improper bow, a wrong word, could spark conflict, and even the smallest misstep could lead to consequences far beyond what he could imagine. He entered the hall, scanning the room carefully. Tables curved in elegant arcs, adorned with food that shimmered and floated in midair. Beverages hovered beside glasses, guided by tiny energy fields. The guests were a kaleidoscope of species, some with multiple limbs, others with iridescent skin, and a few with features that made even him pause in fascination. Yet all eyes quickly found him. A Zithurian noble approached, his 4 arms folding in a formal gesture. Human, he said, you survived yesterday. Today will test your diplomacy, not your strength. You will need to speak and listen carefully. Rylan inclined his head. I can listen and speak. That is part of surviving. The banquet began, and the first interactions were subtle tests. Guests spoke in riddles and proverbs from their cultures, observing his reactions. Some offered compliments that contained hidden barbs. Rylan responded honestly but tactfully, showing respect while avoiding any hint of arrogance. Slowly, the mood shifted. Whispers of approval replaced the quiet suspicion that had followed him yesterday. Lyra observed him from across the hall, her eyes scanning his movements. She noted how he adjusted to the subtle challenges without drawing undue attention. He is remarkable, she whispered to herself. Not because he is human, but because he sees clearly and acts decisively. I did not expect to find someone like this in our midst. The next test was less obvious. A small group of nobles approached him, speaking in hushed tones. They suggested a contest of knowledge, challenging him to understand their history and traditions. Rylan accepted, relying on his memory and instincts. He listened carefully, answered correctly, and even asked questions that showed curiosity rather than ignorance. The nobles paused, surprised that he understood more than they had anticipated. A subtle tension built in the hall as the banquet continued. Rylan sensed that not all guests were here to celebrate. Some were watching, waiting, testing his reactions, hoping he might falter. He did not falter. Every step he took, every word he spoke was measured. Yet he remained human, direct, observant, and uncompromising in his honesty. That alone unsettled many of the Zethurian nobles, who were accustomed to layered deception and indirect communication. As the banquet drew to a close, a messenger approached Ryland, slipping him a small, encrypted note. His eyes narrowed as he read it. It was a warning. Someone planned to disrupt the palace later that night. The intruder would strike during the private ceremonies following the public celebrations. Ryland's instincts flared. He knew that warnings like this could be traps meant to test his reaction, yet he also understood that ignoring it could be disastrous. He folded the note carefully, making his way toward Lyra. "I have received a warning," he said quietly when he found her. "Someone plans to interfere with tonight's ceremonies. It could be a diversion or an attempt at sabotage. We must be ready." Lyra's eyes sharpened. "I suspected as much. There are those who resent the alliance the wedding represents. They would see it fail, but if you are involved, perhaps the attempt will fail instead." Ryland gave her a faint nod. "We will act, not react. That is the only way to survive and protect you." Night fell over the palace and the private ceremonies began. The halls glowed with bioluminescent lights, and the soft hum of energy filled the air. Ryland moved with quiet precision, staying near Lyra without drawing attention. He observed every guest, every staff member, and every movement. His senses, honed from years of survival and battle, were attuned to the smallest anomalies. It did not take long for him to spot the first sign of trouble. A group of masked figures moved through the shadows, aiming for a control panel that regulated the energy fields protecting the ceremonial chambers. Ryland acted immediately. He intercepted the first intruder, using a combination of strength and quick thinking to subdue them without causing alarm. Others followed, and a brief, silent struggle ensued. Ryland used the environment to his advantage, manipulating energy fields and guiding the intruders into areas where palace security could easily contain them. Within moments, the threat was neutralized. Lyra watched in astonishment, her respect for him growing. "You are incredible," she whispered. "I had heard of human warriors, but seeing one in action, it is remarkable." Ryland shook his head slightly. "I do not seek praise, I only act to prevent disaster. That is my role here." When the intruders were dealt with, Velryn approached, bowing deeply. "Master Warrior, your vigilance has once again saved the palace. You have earned the trust of not only the princess, but of the court as well. Few outsiders can claim such a feat." Ryland nodded, but his mind was already working ahead. He knew this was not the end. Those who attempted the disruption were likely part of a larger network, and their failure tonight would not deter them. He needed to be prepared for what was coming next. Lyra joined him as the hall settled into a calm rhythm once more. "You are not like anyone I have ever met," she said softly. "You see clearly, act decisively, and yet remain human, honest, adaptable, and brave. It is rare, and it is valuable." Ryland looked at her, meeting her gaze steadily. "I do what I must. That is all I can offer." She smiled faintly, but there was a flicker of something deeper in her eyes, curiosity, admiration, and perhaps the beginning of trust. "Your role here is unusual. Most guests come to celebrate or to gain favor. You come to survive and to act. That makes you interesting." They walked together through the palace gardens, the soft glow of alien plants reflecting off their forms. For the first time, Ryland felt a connection beyond duty and survival. Lyra was not just a figure to protect. She was intelligent, observant, and capable of seeing him for who he was, not just what he represented. As they reached the edge of a platform overlooking the glowing waters below, Ryland spoke. "I am far from home. I do not know what the future holds in this place, but I know that I will act where action is needed, and I will protect those who cannot protect themselves." Lyra nodded, understanding more than his words conveyed. "Then perhaps you are exactly where you are meant to be. The court may not understand you yet, but I do, and that matters." A distant hum interrupted their moment. Ryland's eyes narrowed as he scanned the palace. Security and staff were moving, subtle signs of movement that indicated others were already planning their next move. He knew the challenges were far from over. Yet, for the first time, he also felt a quiet confidence. He had faced strange rituals, political intrigue, and real threats in a single day. He had adapted, survived, and even earned the respect of a princess and her court. If humans could accomplish this, then perhaps they were more capable than anyone imagined. As the night deepened and the moons of Zithuria cast silver light across the palace, Rylan remained alert. Every shadow, every whisper, and every gesture held potential meaning. But he was ready. A human warrior was not easily intimidated, and a human warrior in an alien court was even more unpredictable. The wedding celebrations would continue, but Rylan knew that his place in the court was no longer as a mere guest. He was a participant, a protector, and perhaps even a symbol. The Empire had seen a glimpse of what a human could do, and he intended to show them more. For Rylan, the journey was far from over. The dangers, the intrigues, and the challenges were only beginning. And as long as he remained observant, adaptable, and brave, there was no obstacle in the universe he could not face. The night carried on, alive with light, music, and the quiet tension of secrets waiting to be revealed. Rylan stood beside Lyra, ready for whatever came next. In a world of alien traditions, politics, and hidden threats, one human warrior had already begun to change the course of events, and no one could predict what he would do next. The palace was alive with energy, even more so than before. The private celebrations had begun, a mix of music, light, and elegant dances. Rylan moved through the halls with careful attention, his senses alert to the smallest anomaly. He had already foiled 2 attempts at disruption, yet he knew instinctively that the real danger had not yet come. Lyra moved alongside him, her eyes scanning the crowd with the precision of someone who had grown up, understanding the subtleties of court life. "They are patient," she whispered. "They wait for the right moment when the crowd is distracted, when attention shifts, when we are most vulnerable." Rylan's jaw tightened. "Then we must be ready at all times. I have seen this before. Attack often comes when people feel safe." They entered the grand ballroom, a space that seemed impossibly large, with walls that glimmered like liquid crystal. Guests from every corner of the empire mingled, their forms diverse and brilliant. Music floated in waves, light reflected off shimmering robes, and the air was charged with a sense of anticipation. Rylan noted small things, an unusual glint in a noble's eye, a hand resting too close to a ceremonial energy conduit, a subtle shift in the floor panels. Every detail mattered. He positioned himself near Lyra, not obtrusive but vigilant, ready to react. Minutes passed, and tension built quietly beneath the celebration. Then it happened. A soft tremor underfoot, barely perceptible, rippled through the floor. Rylan's instincts flared. He spotted movement in the shadows, figures trying to approach the core energy conduits that powered the hall. Without hesitation, he moved. Human speed and reflexes were different from any Zithurian or alien species, and the intruders had not anticipated it. Rylan intercepted them quickly, using their momentum against them. One figure fell into a containment field, another collided with a hovering sculpture designed for ceremony. Guests gasped, but the palace security was quick to respond. Rylan guided them silently, moving with precision so that chaos did not erupt. Within moments the threat was neutralized, the intruders restrained, and the hall calm once more. Lyra's eyes shone with admiration. "You act without hesitation," she said softly. "It is inspiring." Rylan shook his head. "I act because no one else did, that is all." The king himself arrived soon after, a towering figure with an aura of authority that seemed to bend the light around him. He observed Rylan carefully, then spoke in a voice that resonated through the hall. "Human warrior, you have intervened twice now. You act decisively where others hesitate. That is remarkable." Rylan bowed slightly, acknowledging the praise but not seeking it. "I only do what is necessary to protect the court and the princess." The king studied him, his piercing gaze unwavering. "Courage alone does not earn trust in this palace. Action and understanding do, and you have shown both. I am impressed." Rylan noted the subtle approval in the king's tone. In this empire, respect was earned not by words but by deeds. He had already demonstrated his abilities, and now the highest authority acknowledged it. Yet the night was far from over. The celebration continued, and Rylan remained vigilant. He observed the movements of every guest, noticing a subtle tension that others seemed blind to. Whispers passed through the crowd, small gestures exchanged between figures that marked alliances and rivalries. It became clear that someone within the palace had orchestrated more than just a simple attempt at disruption. There was a network, a faction that sought to undermine the empire from within, and the wedding was the perfect cover for their actions. Rylan's mind worked quickly. He began to anticipate their moves, predicting where they might strike next. He noticed a group near the balcony, where energy conduits controlled both lighting and security fields. If those were tampered with, chaos could erupt, and the Empire could be thrown into disorder. He moved silently, positioning himself between the intruders and the conduits. The figures did not realize he was watching until he was upon them. With precise movements, he disarmed and restrained them before they could act. Palace security arrived just in time to secure the area completely. The crowd remained largely unaware, though some noticed the swift, subtle action. Rylan had managed to prevent a disaster without alarming the guests. Lyra found him afterward, her expression a mixture of relief and admiration. "You have saved the ceremony again," she said. "And without anyone realizing, that is incredible." Rylan gave a faint nod. "I only act where needed. The rest is unnecessary." The king approached once more, accompanied by several high-ranking officials. "Human warrior," he said, "your actions tonight have prevented a catastrophe that could have cost lives and threatened the stability of the Empire. Few outsiders can claim such a contribution. You have proven your worth beyond question." Rylan remained calm, aware that humility was also a form of strategy in this environment. "I did what needed to be done, that is all." The king's expression softened slightly. "Your honesty is as valuable as your skill. You are not just a warrior, but an ally. And allies are rare." The private celebrations resumed, but Rylan sensed the palace would never be the same. He had demonstrated that humans could act decisively, think clearly under pressure, and protect the vulnerable. The court had begun to see him not as an outsider, but as someone capable of shaping events in ways they had not anticipated. Lyra walked beside him through the quieted corridors. "You move through this court with ease, yet you are always alert. It is remarkable." "I have never met anyone like you." Rylan glanced at her. "I do not seek ease, I seek understanding. I observe, I act, and I adapt. That is how I survive and how I help." She smiled faintly. "Then perhaps your place here is more significant than even you realize. Not just as a guest, but as someone the Empire can rely on." Rylan considered her words. He had survived battles, navigated dangerous worlds, and faced countless threats. Yet nothing had prepared him for the intricate, subtle dangers of an alien court. Here, a single misstep could have consequences far beyond his understanding. And yet, he had succeeded, not through power alone, but through observation, intelligence, and decisiveness. As the night deepened, the palace lights shimmered across the floating structures, casting reflections in the bioluminescent waters below. Rylan stood on a balcony, observing the city and the celebration within the palace. He understood now that his actions had consequences not just for the wedding, but for the Empire itself. He knew there would be further challenges, more subtle, more dangerous, perhaps more personal. But he was ready. Humans were unpredictable, clever, and adaptable. That unpredictability was a strength, and Rylan intended to use it to protect those who could not protect themselves and to earn the trust of those who doubted him. Lyra joined him, her gaze following his. "You are changing the court's perception," she said quietly. "Not by words, but by action. They respect you now, and that respect can be powerful." Rylan nodded. "Actions speak louder than words. I do not seek power only to ensure safety and fairness. The rest is a consequence I am willing to accept." The princess studied him, her eyes reflecting the soft glow of the alien city below. "I believe you, I trust you, and that is not something I give lightly." Rylan felt a quiet acknowledgement, not of victory, but of responsibility. Trust was earned, and with it came expectations. The Empire had given him a place at its heart, not just as a guest, but as a protector. And he would not fail. As the night stretched on, the palace gradually quieted, though Rylan remained alert. Every shadow, every sound, every subtle gesture held meaning. He understood that challenges were ongoing, not a single event to be survived. And he was ready because he was a human warrior, a being capable of seeing clearly, acting decisively, and adapting to any situation. The wedding would continue, but Rylan's place in the Empire was no longer that of a mere observer. He had proven himself in action, earned the respect of the king and the court, and begun to build a bond with Princess Lyra. The next steps would test him further, but he had learned that humans could thrive where others doubted them, and that bravery, intelligence, and honesty could earn trust across species and worlds. As he watched the palace from the balcony, Rylan felt a quiet determination. The Empire had seen what humans were capable of, and he intended to show them more. Challenges would come, intrigues would unfold, and danger would rise. But he was ready. Because a human warrior, standing at the heart of an alien empire, could change events in ways no one anticipated. And Rylan intended to do just that. The morning sun rose over Zithuria, casting silver and violet light across the floating palace and the shimmering oceans below. Rylan stood on the balcony, observing the city, feeling the weight of the previous night's events settle on him. He had survived tests of skill, wit, and courage, protected the princess from unseen threats, and earned the cautious respect of the court. Yet he knew that today would be the final test, the one that could cement his place in the Empire forever. Lyra approached quietly, her flowing robes reflecting the morning light. "Today, the Council of Elders convenes," she said softly. "They will discuss matters of trust, alliances, and recognition. Your actions have already impressed many, but this is where your role will be formally acknowledged." Rylan turned to her, his expression steady. "Then we will act as we have before, observe, adapt, and do what must be done." She nodded, a faint smile crossing her face. "Yes, and remember, you are not just a guest now. You are part of this. Your decisions will carry weight." The council chamber was vast, larger than any hall Rylan had seen in the Empire. Crystalline pillars rose to a ceiling that seemed to float above, and holographic symbols glimmered in the air, representing the authority and history of the Zithurian Empire. Elders and nobles from across the Empire had gathered, their attention focused on the events of the wedding and the recent disruptions. Rylan entered alongside Lyra, moving with calm assurance. Whispers followed him. He had seen doubt in the eyes of some guests before, suspicion in others. Now those whispers were tempered with awe and curiosity. A human, they thought, had acted where many Zithurians might have hesitated. The king sat at the head of the chamber, his expression authoritative yet measured. "Human warrior," he said, his voice echoing through the hall. "You have intervened in matters that could have endangered this empire. You acted decisively, without hesitation and with understanding. Few outsiders could claim such feats. You have proven yourself, and now it is time for the council to recognize your contributions formally." Rylan inclined his head respectfully. "I only did what was necessary to protect those at risk. That is my duty." Lyra stood beside him, her gaze calm but filled with pride. "The human has acted with honor and skill," she said. "He has saved the palace, preserved the ceremonies, and prevented disaster. His actions are not those of an outsider. They are those of a trusted ally." The council elders murmured, some nodding in agreement, others studying Rylan carefully. One elder, a being with translucent skin and multiple eyes, leaned forward. "We have observed your actions. Tell us, human, do you understand what it means to be part of our court? To act not only with strength, but with diplomacy, patience, and foresight?" Rylan met the elder's gaze steadily. "I understand that strength alone is not enough. Observation, understanding, and careful action are required. I will act where necessary and seek to protect and support this court when I am able. That is all I promise." Another elder, with a voice like chimes, spoke next. "You have demonstrated courage, intelligence, and loyalty. These are rare qualities even among our own, yet the court is still cautious. A human is unpredictable. How do we know you will continue to act in the best interest of the Empire?" Rylan did not hesitate. "Because I act based on what is right, not on politics or ambition. I have no desire to manipulate or deceive. I act to protect and to ensure fairness. If the court judges me by my actions, it will find consistency." The chamber fell silent for a moment, then the king spoke again. "Your words are honest and your deeds prove them. Therefore, I offer you an unusual honor, a position within our royal family, not as a ruler, but as a trusted member. By alliance, you will be recognized as the son-in-law of this palace, symbolically connected to our family. This is rare for a human, and it reflects the trust we now place in you." Rylan's eyes widened slightly, but he remained composed. "I am honored by your trust. I accept not for status, but because it allows me to protect and serve those who need it." Lyra's smile was radiant. "You have earned this, Rylan, not by title or ceremony, but by action and integrity. Welcome to the family." The council erupted in quiet acknowledgement, the murmurs shifting from curiosity to respect. Those who had doubted him now recognized his value. Rylan felt a deep sense of accomplishment, yet he knew that trust was not permanent. It had to be maintained through continued action and integrity. Later, as the celebrations resumed, Rylan walked through the palace gardens with Lyra. The bioluminescent plants glowed softly, reflecting in the waters below. "You have changed the perception of humans in this empire," Lyra said. "Not through words, but through action. They now see that humans can be allies, protectors, and even leaders." Rylan nodded. "I do not seek to change perceptions. I only act as I must. If that changes how others see humans, then so be it. Actions speak louder than words." Lyra's gaze softened. "And yet your actions have inspired many. That inspiration can be powerful. With it, we can build bridges between our worlds. Perhaps even peace that lasts beyond a single alliance." Rylan considered her words. He had traveled the stars, faced countless dangers, and survived where many might have fallen. But here, in this alien court, he realized that his greatest victories were not measured in battle alone. They were measured in trust, respect, and understanding. The palace lights shimmered as night fell once more. Guests from distant worlds mingled, laughter and music filling the air. Yet Rylan remained vigilant, aware that challenges were never truly over. Threats could arise at any time from within or without. But he had proven that humans were capable of meeting those challenges, with courage, intelligence, and integrity. Later, in a private chamber, Lyra approached him with a small, ceremonial token, a glowing crystal shaped like a spiral, representing unity and trust. "This is for you," she said, "a symbol of your place here and of the bond we now share with the court and the empire. It is not just a gift, it is a recognition of your role and your courage." Rylan accepted the crystal with a nod. "I will honor it. Not for myself, but for those it represents. For the princess, the court, and the empire, I will protect them as I have promised." She studied him for a moment, then placed a hand lightly on his shoulder. "You are more than a warrior, Rylan. You are a bridge between worlds. And that is a rare thing indeed." As they walked back into the palace, Rylan felt a sense of belonging he had never known. For a human to be recognized in an alien court was extraordinary. To be trusted, respected, and honored was beyond anything he had imagined. Yet he knew that this was only the beginning. There would be more challenges, more threats, and more opportunities to act. And he was ready. The wedding had concluded, the threats had been neutralized, and the court had acknowledged his contributions. But for Rylan, this was not the end of his journey. It was a new beginning, a chance to continue shaping the future of the empire, to protect those who could not protect themselves, and to demonstrate the strength, intelligence, and courage of humanity. In the days that followed, he became more than a warrior. He advised the court, participated in discussions about security and diplomacy, and continued to learn the intricate customs of the Zithurian Empire. With Lyra by his side, he began to understand the delicate balance of power, respect, and alliance that governed the court. And he found that humans, though different, could thrive in even the most alien of worlds. Rylan stood once more on the balcony overlooking the floating city. The moons cast silver light across the waters below, and the palace shimmered with life. He had arrived as a guest, a human warrior invited to an alien wedding. He remained vigilant, adaptable, and alert as he always had been. But now he was also part of the empire, recognized, trusted, and respected. He smiled faintly. The universe was vast, full of danger and wonder, yet here he was, a human who had proven that courage, intelligence, and honesty could earn a place among the stars. And he intended to continue proving it, wherever the future might take him. For Rylan, the journey was far from over. But he knew one thing with certainty: a human could survive, adapt, and even thrive in the heart of an alien empire. And sometimes that was enough to change everything. As the palace lights glimmered and the celebrations continued, Rylan felt a quiet determination. The empire had welcomed him, the princess had trusted him, and the court had begun to see the truth. Humans, when guided by courage, wisdom, and integrity, could be forces that no one anticipated, capable of shaping events and inspiring hope across the galaxy. Rylan, the human warrior, had arrived as an outsider. He remained a warrior, alert and ready. But now he was also a son-in-law of the palace, a trusted ally, and a symbol of what humanity could achieve among the stars. And he intended to honor that role with every action, every decision, and every challenge that lay ahead. The moons of Zithuria reflected in his eyes as he gazed across the glowing city. Adventure awaited, threats would arise, and tests would continue. But Rylan was ready. because wherever humans went, they carried courage, ingenuity, and an unyielding will. And that was a force even the most advanced alien empires could not ignore. The human warrior had arrived. The empire had noticed. And the stars themselves seemed to recognize that this was only the beginning of his story.